How do you get messages from your own loved ones and know for sure it's really them and not just wishful thinking? Welcome to Mediumship Sparks, where we connect more deeply with spirit and source and follow the sparks of insight and inspiration that bring us greater awareness, healing, and just more flow into our lives. I'm Noelle Dean, intuitive medium, licensed therapist, and your host. A quick note before we begin: this podcast is for educational purposes only and provides general information. It is not medical or psychological advice and is not a substitute for care from a licensed health professional. I'm so grateful we get to step into this. Welcome to this episode of Mediumship Sparks. Getting my own messages from my own loved ones has been one of the biggest challenges for me in developing my mediumship. I would love to know if you experience the same thing. I would think it would be an easy trap for people to fall into, because when we first start connecting and we pick up on messages for other people, we can run those messages by that person and get an immediate validation. And that can build so much confidence and be so helpful to know, gee, I had no reason to know this or even say this about this person. And you picked up on something that they were actually able to validate. And how cool is that? There's a trap in there, though. I had to do practice readings on people. And of course, I've turned first to people that I knew because they would probably be open to me practicing with them. Sometimes it was great, and sometimes it was not. When I think I know something about somebody, it's so easy to have that be the filter for what I think is possible or not possible for that person. An example was when I saw somebody smoking in their garage. In my mind, I'm like, they don't smoke. But I saw it a couple of times. And then by like the third time I saw that visual, I brought it up to them and they were like, oh, yeah, I've been going back to smoking. And I was like, crap, why do I think I know anything about somebody who I didn't even know that well? Just yesterday, I did a reading for somebody that I worked with 5 or 6 years ago. She's amazing, but we weren't like super close. And I didn't know a whole lot about her. Anyway, I noticed how even though normally in a session, I will say everything that I see and hear and feel, unless it feels off or ominous, and then I probably won't. Normally, I don't really filter other than those two kinds of situations. She mentioned that a family member had passed and who I'm seeing was so young, it couldn't have been that family member. But that was the family member. They were showing me a visual of when they used to all hang out together. So I had to remind myself a couple of times during that session, like, what do I know? And then everything flowed a whole lot better. But imagine if that's what happens with somebody I think I know, what about for myself? Of course, I'm going to imagine or assume that maybe I'm influencing information that I'm getting, or I might be skewing messages. I just have always felt like that's the hardest, is to get something for myself. So I didn't even try for years. I wanted more connection at times with my loved ones, but it just wasn't worth the frustration of the self-doubt. Once we get in our heads, whatever we might think about the person in spirit or the message that we may be picking up and it can't be them, or that can't be what they said because that's what I was hoping for and I don't quite trust that. I don't trust myself. Did I really discern that? Am I just projecting? It's so noisy and annoying. I had just a couple of moments of intense connection with Papa, my grandfather. We did a podcast together. Obviously, I really have worked on our communication to be able to do that. But quite a few years ago, when I first realized I have to stop avoiding it, because I think I would just get nervous thinking about connecting for myself. And I kept not doing it. In the back of my book, I have a story about the first time I really felt a connection with Papa. I'll never forget it. I was sitting at my desk in this office and had a sense of a hand coming over mine, and then got a visual of his hand. He had a very distinct hand. He had a very distinctive wedding ring and kind of arthritic fingers and wide fingers and knuckles. When I see that hand, it brings me right to him. And then I got a visual of him dancing with me at my wedding. He passed many years before I ever got married. It was beautiful to have that experience. It still takes some work to focus in when I'm feeling a signal from somebody in spirit, like chills or pressure somewhere, to calm myself down, ask who it is in a way that I can distinguish, and then receive the message. Over time, our mediumship, like with any other skill, can get stronger and better. You can learn to trust what you get more and more. It's a slow process, but it's certainly possible and can be very much worth it. I'm reminded of all of this because a few hours ago, I was updating my website and some of the graphics, and I was feeling chills and a sense of a presence, and I couldn't tell who it was. And I don't always ask, but I was curious about who it was because the presence part felt really strong. And I asked for an identifying visual, and that didn't really come. So I just used my check-in process and asked, is this Papa? And I was getting a note. And then I got that it was the father that I grew up with. And I immediately see too flashy about my website. I'm like, okay, you're entitled to your opinion. So I immediately pull out my phone, bring up my website on my phone, and look through all the pages so he can see. And then he said, it's beautiful with lovely and groovy graphics, which was nice feedback. He also told me he wanted to help me with my business because he didn't do well in business, but he wanted more for me, which was very sweet. If you've heard me talk about him before, he is not somebody that I had a close relationship with, not even somebody I would have called on or expected to be in touch with once he crossed over. I don't make the assumption that somebody is going to necessarily be rehabilitated when they leave their body or healed right away. That's not been my experience. But through a series of connection moments, he has become somebody that I feel a lot more comfortable with and safe with being connected to when he comes through. I never call him. I don't really call any of them. I respond when they show up, but I don't typically ask because I assume they're doing stuff. I always get a little bit nervous when somebody is coming in. I have to take a couple of breaths and make a conscious choice to calm myself down on the inside to be able to receive an actual message. The biggest and best, and I feel like most important tool or skill is finding a way to get a yes and no answer to questions objectively. Whether you use a physical pendulum, which my hand isn't steady enough to use a physical pendulum with confidence. I've used my body as a pendulum for many years. I would recommend finding a way to do that for yourself. That is the first thing I teach people in my class. And even when people come to my mediumship circle, if they don't have a check-in method, I encourage them to create one, and we usually do it together. It's a great tool to help you build some confidence around asking questions where normally your objectivity would be an issue and you would feel compromised. It used to be with my grandparents, I wanted them to come around and give positive messages like they're proud of me. I always idealized my grandparents and wanted to feel like in their eyes, I'm a good girl doing good things, even as an adult, which sounds so silly, but maybe you can relate. I wanted to hear them say they were proud of me. For years, wouldn't try to get messages because I knew that I was going to skew it, or I felt like I would. I've mentioned before that I gave myself what meant to be a writing retreat, but turned into a mediumship retreat. Had so much great mediumship connection time. It was amazing. I wasn't distracted. I was a little bit nervous about it because I felt really out of my element, but it was excitedly nervous kind of feeling. And I had the most connection I've ever had with Papa there. It was like we were having a conversation at a lot of different intervals. It was amazing, as well as other people. I could see other relatives just sitting around. It was so cool to see my great grandmother in a way that I remember her from a black and white photograph from my father's bar mitzvah. A lot of times when people show up in spirit in a mediumship session, they'll show themselves in their prime. Back to my coworker who I just did a session with, I was seeing a family member of hers who passed in their 30s, but I'm seeing a young person about 9 years old. How the person is dressed seems important because it's being emphasized. It turns out that was a time when these two used to play together, spend a lot of time together. That was one of the many validations that came through during this reading, which is very cool and very specific. But look, distinguishing what you're perceiving versus wishful thinking is an exercise in discernment for sure. And building that sense of trust. Maybe you are hanging out with another friend who's working on supporting themselves to practice intuition, and together you connect with their person or your person and see what you both pick up on and how close you get. Helpful validations can be supportive in building your confidence. That visual I had of Papa and my wedding gave me the confidence to believe in it. I felt so emotional because I felt so close to him in that moment. I felt his energy right here in my heart. But also he brought up something that would never have occurred to me, which was dancing at my wedding. I wouldn't even have thought of that. I didn't have a preconceived idea of what I wanted him to bring through. But I want to go back to when I gave myself that mediumship retreat. I realized I didn't need these messages of validation from my grandparents anymore, or I wasn't hoping for them. I was really feeling that peace. It was really wonderful. A bit later on that retreat, I have this beautiful connection with a lot of my grandparents. And then I actually felt the confidence about the messages that came through because I didn't have an attachment to what I hoped to hear from them. That was very helpful. When we don't anticipate or predict what we think that person is going to say or how they're going to interact with us, and we let ourselves be surprised. When you know somebody for a long time, it's so easy to think, oh, I know what they're going to say about this, and I know what they're going to say about that, or how they're going to respond to this situation. Sometimes when people are evolving, you don't know. They're evolving, and you have to let your experience of them evolve with them. People on the other side don't necessarily remain stagnant. We want to let ourselves understand that they are growing, usually, at different paces. That's part of their journey. And we can have an open mind or not about who we might want to connect with. And can we create space in our mind and in our heart for their growth? Some people who pass may be on the never list. I will never connect. I don't care. They've done too much damage to me, and I feel no need to connect. Those might be amazing boundaries for you to have, and good for you. If that feels right in your heart of hearts, go with that. When we have that kind of energetic boundary, often that does not get penetrated, and that's great if you want that. I've learned for myself, I didn't have a family member who was like that. And I had people who were more neglectful and kind of crappy and didn't feel a desire to be connected to them when they were here. So I wasn't feeling it when they were gone. But then things changed. And I have the advantage of spending time being open and sometimes them coming in. Like my grandma, Elsie, I would have never thought that I would feel close or supported by her. But she shows up all the time. It's really nice. But if mediumship is the umbrella term, then there's all these smaller ways to develop that skill and the ability to, set your opinion or maybe hopes aside and come into a calm, grounded space with yourself and feel and enjoy the connections of people without having a predicted way that they're going to interact with you might be a helpful way to go if that feels safe, and to open yourself up more to trusting you. It's not even so much about them. It's you. Are you reliable to yourself? Have you learned to trust your discernment? Being a people pleaser, especially those of us that are empathic, sometimes it can be hard to trust your discernment because you've probably abandoned yourself to support somebody else. Often we feel other people's pain and we don't want them to feel pain. We also don't want to feel their pain. So to put both of us out of pain, sometimes we do things for them or around them that support them, but may not support us at all. We don't want to do that with somebody in spirit. And I don't think they're looking for that when they're healing, farther along their healing journey. But we create dynamics in our heads about people. I was just asking Harvey if he had anything he wanted to add. He's saying second chances are priceless. He's saying being grounded helps for yourselves and those around you. He's saying summary, colon, all there is love, compassion, and understanding, supporting yourselves and each other. And people in spirit want to support you, but don't be surprised by somebody's bad behavior. He's suggesting let it ground, the connection, some forgiveness if you feel that in your heart. And he's suggesting to experience their message as heartful. He's reminding me of when I, quote, turned him away, which I did quite a few times when he would come around me, when I would be open connecting with family in life. He was the kind of person that would tell dad jokes. We just didn't have the more authentic relationship and communication. When he first started showing up after he crossed over in my energetic space, he was doing that same thing, kind of being jokey. And I was a clear no effing way am I connecting with you. You can leave. And he's saying I did that 6 or 7 times. And he's saying he nearly gave up on my forgiveness. It was only in a mediumship workshop. I was paired up with 2 women who gave me messages from him of apologies. The facilitator asked how each group did. And I brought up how I got this same kind of message from both women. The facilitator said something like, you might want to understand he actually means it. It hadn't really occurred to me to give him a second chance. I felt disappointed in him in death as I did in life until that moment. And I realized I had to concede my rigidness about it. Not that I thought he was dangerous. I just thought connecting with him would be a waste of my time. So it wasn't a lack of safety. He's claiming it was his lack of compassion and empathy for me to have tried to come across jokingly when he knowingly knew I had no patience left for that. That's a really good summary of it. Anyway, I'm feeling moved to share all of this because it's complicated, right? There's those that you desperately want to hear from and you want to get loving messages from. And you're afraid if you pick up on something very sweet from them that you made it up because you don't know if that was from them. And how do you learn from that? And where do you draw the line of, okay, no, I'm not making this up. This really was from them. Do you have a check-in method that gives you extra confidence that's objective yes and no? Because you can't skew it. And then you just have to go with how it feels to you. Does it feel sincere and authentic? Does it feel safe? Does it feel like something that actually feels right for you? I hope you have the support you need to make the best choices for yourself about who you're connecting with on any level. People here or people who have gone above. Decide for yourself what's right and learn how you can distinguish how to trust what you're getting when you can know that it's right. And I'm excited for you to be on that journey because it's pretty priceless. Who would have thought? I wouldn't have. That this was possible, that this was doable, that this is like an everyday thing that we could actually do. We didn't need somebody else to do it for us or with us or just tell us about it and then we would just be hoping someday it's available. If I can do it, you can do it. I believe that, and I hope you do too. Harvey's saying good night, good day, good afternoon, good evening. And I'm saying take good care of yourself. And I will speak with you again soon. Take care. Thanks for spending this time with me on Mediumship Sparks. If this episode resonated with you, please like it, subscribe, rate, and certainly share it with somebody else who could benefit. If you're interested in any support I might be able to provide as you navigate your spiritual path, please feel free to check out my offerings at connectingwithnoelle.com and reach out at mediumshipsparkspodcast@gmail.com. Take good care of yourself, and I'll look forward to being with you again soon.